In this video, you'll learn how AI is becoming an economic driver in major cities, states, and provinces. We explore the challenges and opportunities for AI adoption in metropolitan cities like Calgary and its impact on investment and growth. We also discuss the difficulties for small and medium-sized businesses to fully adopt AI because of the challenges of running their business. Finally, we look at what an AI integrated economy looks like and how long will that take. Let's accelerate your business. Welcome to the AI Accelerator for Business show, brought to you by 0 to 60.ai, where you get the latest strategies, tactics, and information about the business benefits of artificial intelligence. My name is Carl Ye. I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Bradshaw, and we have a special guest today. His name is Brad Perry. He's the president and CEO of Calgary Economic Development. Thank you very much, Brad, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You know, you had background in the AI space, and can you tell us a little bit more about that? And I guess like how that ties in your perspective, you know, from your vantage point, how real is AI as an economic driver versus just hype?
I think it's gotten past the hype stage. I mean, yeah, if you look back, I had my first AI company back in 2015, way too soon, right? But the impetus back then was I got to hang out with some companies, and I was doing some investing, and I was working in the ecosystem in Toronto, and I got exposed to a couple of companies that are doing some really interesting work around deep neural networks, and I got really hooked on that to figure out what the hell was this thing, what was it doing, what the implications were amazing. But at the time, what I also saw, though, was that the usage was only for big corporates. Like a lot of banks were using, a lot of insurance companies were using it, but nobody was actually helping the SMEs or the not-for-profits to understand how to structure this, right? And I think, you know, taking a step back, the big challenge is people think AI is this thing, but AI is really, at the end of the day, is data, right? It's how to use data, how to use that, and how do you build models around that. And so the thesis that we had built out was how do we help basically, you know, deconstruct AI for SMEs and not-for-profits. And that's where I started with this work. And I got the chance to meet with Jeffrey Hinton and stuff like that. I thought it was incredibly fascinating. Now, I was a little too soon, obviously, given the processing ability and the time and stuff, but there was definitely an appetite for that. And that's why you're seeing, you know, fast forward 10 years, now you're starting to see just that adoption start to happen. You're starting to see those go. So that was the challenge. I think it's real. It's absolutely real. I think what's really interesting now, though, I'm not sure if you want to talk about trends, but you know what we're seeing now is this notion of speed to market is what's winning, right? So all these LLMs, all this stuff's been based on how fast can you get shit back when you do prompts. But now we're seeing is that, you know, the agents have some lag behind that. So we know that they're only about 80% correct part of the time. Now you're starting to see them trying to rush to get stuff and starting to build on their own sort of biases. Where I think I see the next sort of wave happening is you're going to go into sentient, right? So it's not about speed, but it's about sentient context that the machines can bring to you to bring you back into that role. So I think it's absolutely real. I think we're going to keep iterating or keep seeing different kinds of things getting built. And I think it is definitely real. I think from an economic driver standpoint, it's really interesting when you think about, you know, one of our objectives at CED, obviously is to help, you know, create jobs or retain jobs. But then you juxtapose that with the productivity piece, right? And so we want to be more productive, but that may mean less labor. So it's a really interesting time around that as people start to get used to using these tools and building this new sort of subculture of employment around that kind of stuff.
Brad, where's that balance? Because we have that conversation in just about every meeting we have with people in employment and replacing jobs and that balance. And we always say that we have a corporate responsibility to try and keep people employed. It doesn't make sense to replace people, but then you also got to stay competitive. So where's that balance for these corporations to stay competitive? Because we always use the comparison. I refer to my buddy Kurt at Checker Cabs. I mean, they had a great business and they never saw an Uber coming and it knocked them on their ass. How do we have Calgary companies and how do we build that culture to kind of, so that at least Calgary and Alberta can lead and balance that people versus efficiency?
Yeah, I think it's two things. One, you know, if you think about the use for AI, especially in the context of some of those rote tasks, I think as we talk about here, you know, what I try to do is create time and space for people to do really important work. And I think that's where the AI piece will help people, right? We'll take some of those things off the plate that are just redundant and monotonous and are prone to human error. Because if you get bored or if you get, you know, a fat finger and stuff like that, I think that helps take that. And that gives people time to be more strategic and think. So I think I think there's an overblown proportion of people thinking just the AI is going to, get rid of everybody. I know Block just announced last night that they're laying off 6,000 people, half the company, which kind of flies in the face of what I'm saying. But the reality is, I think as you think of SMEs, which is 96% of our businesses are SMEs in our city specifically, and I think some of these tools can help them just be more efficient. It's not about replacing somebody; it's about optimizing that person's brain power versus them just having to do something that's just going to be repetitive and error prone. So that's the balance that I kind of see. I think we'll still see that employment. It's just gonna be a little bit different, right? It's like anytime we've gone through any industrial revolutions, you've seen that. You've seen a little bit of a dip in employment, but then it comes back up because there's new skills that are being developed to drive that forward.
When we talk about, with our prospects, we talk about gaps. We talk about the gaps between people who use AI versus those who don't. Those who use AI versus those who use it to its full capabilities. And I think the biggest gap is using AI versus using it for daily work. And company after company we talk to, yes, people are using AI, but there still is, I don't know how to use it for my particular job. Like, I know generically I can plan my travel and maybe get some recipes, but I'm like, for my specific job, I'm not really sure how to apply it. And is it training? Is it regular learning? Whatever that is the company providing me the tools to be able to do this? What do you see in terms of, just from your interaction with businesses, from an internal adoption to the actual business itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess what I should have said, I'm also the CEO of the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, right? Which is the fund that was set up in 2017, 2018 to help drive diversification and build stuff. And one of the things we're actually looking at right now, how do we help our community learn about these things and adopt that, right? Because again, not everybody has time. I mean, you hear people always say, I'm too busy running my business. I don't have time to learn these things. So how do we build something that allows them to see that ability to learn those specific things? And so what we're trying to do is think, how do we build something where, whether it's every week or every 2 weeks, there's a subject matter expert that's a very, very hyper specific task that they're showing how to use the tool. So maybe it's a marketing plan. Like, how do I build a marketing plan using AI? And what we want to do is we want to be able to showcase that for our community or SMEs, and then put it out to them to let them adopt that at their schedule. So instead of trying to schedule something to say, you have to show up at Tuesday at 10 a.m. and we're going to teach you this. It's like, no, let's hold that, but let's get a repository of all these new tools, put it up there so our community can access them and start to use them at their pace in their time, but very, very hyper specific types of examples that can go across multiple sectors or multiple types of businesses, whether it's a dry cleaner or whether, especially the SMEs who could really use this stuff. How do we help them make it easier for them to jump the shark a little bit, to bring those kinds of things in? So it's one of the projects we've been working on for a little while, and I think we're getting close, and knock on wood, we'll be talking more about that, and hopefully in Q2.
One of the things we find is that, we go into a lot of these companies we're dealing with and we say, we can guarantee you increase in efficiencies 10 to 40%. But the problem is that exactly that. It's too busy. We use the analogy of, you got to take some time to sharpen your saw to be more efficient, but it's just too busy, because what we find is the biggest challenge is not the technology, it's the change management. It's
Absolutely.
trying to get people to shift their thinking. And even Carl and I, we find ourselves like, I'll be doing a task and he'll be like, why the hell are you doing it that way when you could do, and I'm like, shit, even us, and we're in it every single day. But I mean, how do you get that change management with these organizations?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think again, it's about one thing. It's one thing to say and show the productivity gains and stuff like that. But again, I think people just hear it. It's like, yeah, whatever. That's nice. But how much time is it going to, it's like what we did with one of the programs we did with our Talented YYC program, right? So what we noticed was the big challenge we had in trying to get students some internships and co-ops was the SMEs were saying the exact same thing. I'm too busy. It's not valuable. So we actually understood that barrier. And so the team actually built a playbook to go into SMEs and say, this is how you bring a student in. Here's how you get value. And it just, the adoption rate skyrocketed. So it's going in and showing the playbook and step by step versus saying, you got to try this. And I think to your point, Jeff, it's hard for them to believe. Yeah, that's nice. It's on paper. Everyone tells me that. They're all walking around. Everyone's walking in my door saying, I can save you 50% of time. And there's a bit of that snake oil kind of thing that people are just so skittish and so afraid that we've got to be careful, right? And so I think it's just, you have to have those use cases. And even for my company way back when, I think the biggest learning for me was you needed to have those POCs, the proof of concepts. You need to have examples of hardcore adoption and the ability to apply, right? So the applied piece of AI is what was missing when we started out 10 years ago. But now we've got got the chips and everything else that can move faster. So, but it's this notion, how do you keep showing use cases? And honestly, we're in the same boat on quantum. I've been, Jeff, I've been talking about quantum since I came back to Calgary, and it's a huge opportunity for our ecosystem in our city. We're a leader there. We need to get that. But again, the adoption rate, until people see that and showcase how it can actually work on a proof of concept, is really challenging. And so that's one thing we're pushing hard in Quantum City, is to get a bunch of these POCs and get people to understand what's happening, and then let them see the tangible results out of that.
What? Because that's like, how do you light a fire under some people's asses? Because I think, and do you have to? Because we have a lot of companies, like we have some that are early adopters, they're all over it, they're seeing the benefits. We have others that are, curious. We have that third part that are like, you know what, we're going to look at it at Q1 of 27. And we're like, holy shit. And like, we're like, even if you don't use us, like we're out there educating companies. We do these executive presentations. We say, we don't care if you use us or not, just do something. Like, don't ignore this. But how do you, from a citywide standpoint, economic development standpoint, how do you try and encourage companies to pay some attention to it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, it's about meeting them where they're at. Like we were talking about that program they're trying to run through. So how do you meet them at where they're at? How do you give them that stuff? Because again, human nature, right? It's path of least resistance. Like change is hard. 95% of people don't want change. And so it's convincing them and having some use cases and some of those angels who have tried it and become ambassadors. Oh my God, this is so great that I've been able to make that change. But I think, which is weird, but if you think the impact that COVID had, I think once we went into this digitized economy, everybody, the pendulum swung so far over, they all dumped a ton of money, a ton of resources. And then now they're going, oh shit, did we overinvest? So I think you're seeing a bit of that hangover, and people are thinking twice whether or not this is something that's going to be short-term or long-term. And with all the other priorities and other pressures between tariffs and geopolitical, there's so many factors now for companies to think about, right? It's overwhelming. And so I think they were just a little bit afraid of the pendulum swinging too far. And is that going to happen again? If I go all in now, am I also going to be stuck in 2 years from going, oh shit, I made an investment that I can't support anymore? So I think there's a fine balance of that education, but I think it's going to be that step change. And when I used to sell my stuff, it was the accordion strategy, right? You talk to the C-level people who get it right away, and then you talk to the actual frontline workers who want to use the tools, but it's the middle management that are always the biggest challenge, because they've got so much stuff on their plate that they don't want to try something new because it's too much work and too much hassle. So you got to squeeze the top and the bottom so the middle finally goes, yeah, I think it makes sense. So I think that's what we have to think about, is how do you convince the middle managers to want to take risks, want to try new things, and let their teams kind of open up. We talk about here as risk takers. Like I want a team of risk takers. I want people who aren't afraid to make mistakes. As long as the first mistake isn't too expensive and that we don't make the same mistake twice. But that's what we have to build, is that kind of a thesis or ethos in some of our companies on the adoption side.
And a follow-up to that, what we find as well is what a lot of CEOs, because they're so busy, executive teams, they automatically hand it off to their IT department because it has to do with computers. They think it's an IT issue, and we're out there going, this is not an IT. No. Like IT absolutely has to be involved. But your senior executive team, everybody needs to be educated because it's going to impact your business operations. So we do these presentations, and I think there's a missing piece for that component for that C-level suite, because they just go, I'm too busy. We do these presentations. We did one yesterday to an executive team, and all of them were blown away going, I had absolutely no clue this is what was going on. So, it's, how do you get it from IT driven to executive team driven?
Yeah, and I think it's part of that, helping them understand how it can save some of their time in their day as well, right? Actually showing some use cases at the executive level, even if it's just a simple prompt, or using Copilot, or using ChatGPT, or some of the other ones, or Manus, which is the new one. I don't know if you guys have followed Manus at all, but it's kind of an interesting play. And I think once they get their hands on it, it's like, okay, now I want everybody to do it, right? So I think we found that as well. Even us, when we did even our management systems, we have basically a task management system that we implement across the organization. And what we realized is that we needed to actually dedicate somebody to help all of our business units adopt all this stuff. And so we actually restructured a little bit last year. I made somebody our sort of VP of productivity, right? And so their job is now to work with every single department, understand the flows, and then bring in the optimization piece through AI to help make that flow happen easier and more quickly and map those processes out. So yeah, you need to have sponsorship at the top level for sure. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. But like you said, a lot of times it's that, but I think they have to move away from the IT piece, because obviously you need to have that data governance, you need to have all those things in place, but it's also about making sure your smart people can spend time being smart. versus doing stuff that's just taken away from them. And that's part of the education piece. And I think as you talk to C-suites, that's what they'll understand. It's like the ROI that you're going to get from that person is going to go up tenfold versus what it is right now.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we see definitely is when you start going deeper into the processes, the workflows for companies, a lot of it has their legacy, decades even. There's workarounds to the workarounds. It's like a big spider web of everything. And
Yep.
the one thing that I see is like any startup doesn't have those decades old legacy.
Yeah.
Are you a little worried that some of the legacy companies may not move fast enough where just like Jeff was talking about Uber and Checker, an AI startup using full stack, it's going to eat their lunch. It's inevitable on many fronts because it's just, they have all the leverages built in, no change management to do, no training to go through.
Well, the irony of that, though, Carl, is that if they used AI, they could actually do some foresight work and actually understand what are the trends coming from my industry that's going to eat my lunch next week and be on top of it, right? And that's what we do here. We do a lot of foresight work, but I think that's another example of that. But I think where I think I'm optimistic is that you've got a different generation now of managers moving up into more executive level positions who are now more accustomed to using those tools. You're coming out of schools now, you're spending a couple of years. Now you're adopting some of these tools. You've been kind of, AI curious, but as you start to see that shift, you'll start to see sort of more of that senior management executive level who are familiar with the tools, who are used to using tools, who question like, why the hell are you not using this tool, right? And I think Amazon was key to that. They said, look, AI is not a competitor. It's your partner. You've got to consider it as a coworker because it's going to help you be better at your job. And again, I go back and say, it's about creating time and space for people. And these are the tools that will do that and allow people to be more strategic in the work that they do.
Brad, what do you see it as you travel around and you talk to colleagues? I mean, are you seeing other cities, markets trying to use AI as a competitive advantage and trying to take that leadership role? Because I mean, a lot of it is, like one of our biggest challenges, we're like a lot of companies, we could probably hire 10 operators if we had people with the experience to put into these companies to execute. We just can't find the people because it's come so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, are you seeing that in other cities or trying to take it as a competitive advantage?
Yeah, they're trying. I don't think this is going to sound arrogant, but we're a bit more advanced. At the work that we do on foresight piece and, building the data models and build our own, platforms for data integration and data analysis. So I think there's a consciousness of it everywhere. I just don't know if everybody's cracked the code on how to do that. There's a lot of people out there thinking about it, but I'm not sure they're thinking at the community level like we are, which is how do we make sure we help our community become more productive?
On that note, though, what should government or economic development organizations play in accelerating? And you've talked so much about what CED does, but like, is there anything governments can play? Because I know in the UK, I think there's a fund that they put out to help train. You've heard some of that stuff in Singapore too, but like, what should governments be doing to help that? And I know our federal government has a minister of AI and there's some funding for it, but like, is there more that they could be doing?
I don't know if it's more. I just think it's more strategic, right? It's more intentional around the stuff. But just like I said with OSIF, we were very keen on that, understanding that. And so, even for OSIF Express, when we did that to allow our small and medium-sized enterprise to get access to some of that fund, one of the things there was about training. So we actually had a subsidy for them to help train their teams. And so a lot of the companies took advantage of that. And I think that's the idea is, getting out there and providing the ability for people to pick up these tools and use them. That's where they should support versus trying to invest in a company to deliver something, right? How do they create the environment to allow companies to do that? That's the thesis that we have around OSIF is doing that. And I think, again, we're the only municipality in North America that actually has an investment fund, which helps. And as our mandate for that is to help make sure we have a long-term diversified economy in the city. And this is a key part of helping our constituents drive in our key sectors and using these kinds of tools. So that's why we've been really doubling down on trying to support some of that. And I think if you look at some of the examples out of the Middle East, right? They're teaching kids in grade 4 and 5 on how to use these tools. So they are going to be AI and agentic and forward-facing literacy on technology is only going to permeate throughout. So I think that's part of where we got to think about what's the curriculum? How do we change it? How do we make sure people understand how to use the tools at an earlier age? And then move through the ranks again.
What are you seeing, just to follow that up, what are you seeing from the post-secondary institutions? Because For us, like we're with one of the local colleges, we're building out a curriculum, but it kind of doesn't make any sense because, like, oh, we need this curriculum by March so we can teach it in September. And like, I don't know how we can build a curriculum when like, well, we don't know what's going on in September. And, we've seen, I was doing a panel with U of C, and I asked, okay, how many of you have professors here who won't let you use AI? And I would say half the room put that up.
Mhm.
So like, and so there is that hesitation on that post-secondary side, which I feel is a disadvantage, especially moving forward. Like, what are you hearing on like just Alberta or Calgary's post-secondary institutions?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing some stuff happening. I think they're acknowledging it and they're trying to put it into curriculum. But I think it's, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, but it's not unlike a university education, right? It's not the stuff that they're feeding you. It's you're learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with the AI piece. How do we make sure we teach people to always want to learn and continue to want to know how to learn, how to figure things out? So it's less about the functional tool, but more about this building a curiosity of wanting to explore and try and experiment with these things. And I don't know if that's it. I think they're trying. I know the UC is trying to do some really interesting stuff. I don't know if they've gotten completely across the line yet, but as I said before, as you start to see the more senior generation, that's politically correct, start to sort of move out, and you got the younger ones coming in who want to try and adopt these new tools. That'll be the difference. I mean, I'm sure it's just like whenever an encyclopedia came out, right? I'm sure a lot of people were freaking out about that, and oh my God, it's gonna take away from the education system. Kids won't learn because all the information is there for them. It's a tool to help you learn, right? It's a tools to help you get better at what you're doing.
Like AI startups having a meaningful contribution to the local economy? Like, are you starting to see that happen? Is it, with different, or is it a lot of, older companies that are adopting it, or is it a bit of both, or?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I don't think we're quite at the scale of what the Valley's doing right now, right? We know right now that the biggest thing in the Valley is which is going to be the solopreneur to have $1 billion company.
Right.
And we're getting close. Like we're getting really, really close right now. But I think there are companies here that are building some really interesting products. I think though we have to help our corporate community or SMEs understand that they have to invest in our local companies. They've got to give them a chance. I don't think we see that from a procurement standpoint, right? We need to have companies want to take risks and, work with some of our startups, work with these kinds of things. And it's hard because like you guys know all too well, you're seeing this every day. It's just, they're overwhelming. There's so much stuff out there. There's so much content. It's coming at you so fast that you just shut down, right? It's the old, well, Jeff, the example, the old tennis ball example, right? From advertising days, right? Throw one tennis ball at me, the chances of me catching 100%. You throw two, 80% I catch both. You throw three, and there's probably a 40% chance I catch two. You throw four, I'm going to get pissed off. You throw five, I walk away because there's just too much shit coming at me. So that's what I think the stage that we're in, there's so much volume of information going at people that they just don't know, and they just shut down because you just can't process all that kind of stuff in that speed.
Well, it's funny too because Carl kind of joked. He posted a month ago that we had to go to Boston to work with an oil company. The funny thing is that it's a 125-year-old company that makes olive oil and canola oil and all food oil, run by a privately run. They do $500 million a year, and they are all in on AI. We've also got a client out of Saudi Arabia that we're working with, two clients on creating AI strategies for some massive oil refineries. But I think when we talk to some of even the local oil, you're right. They're just going, that don't get it. You're throwing too many tennis balls at me.
Yeah.
Let me just go back to my desk and.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
In that case, like, what would you say to those executives or CEOs who think, hey, that's interesting, but you know what? It's not really a painkiller. It's more of a vitamin for me. Like, it's not really urgent because I have more urgent things to think about.
Yeah. But I think that's the challenge you're going to have, right? It's not urgent right now, but in 5 years from now, bite yourself in the get bit in the ass because you didn't think about this. You didn't get on your roadmap. That's why I talk about quantum. Like quantum is not on anybody's roadmap yet. I'm saying, guys, if you're not thinking about quantum right now, especially the big companies, whether you're in traditional energy or transportation, logistics, all those things, again, that thing's going to come at you and it's going to hit you hard. And you're not going to know what happened. So I think it's also incumbent upon some of the leaders to get out in the community too, right? Get out to some of the events, get out to a platform, get out to a meetup and just hear what's going on and just have your ear to the ground. And I think that's the other part, right? The corporate venture capital in the city is still something that has to get unlocked. I mean, we haven't done that yet. And I think I know that's a side tangent from what we're talking about, but I think that's part of the other thing that we need to see.
And you mentioned 5 years out. I guess, two questions. Is it 5 years out or is it 2 years out? And what does successful AI integration for the Calgary economy look like in your opinion?
I mean, I think it's less than 5 years out. I think it's got to happen sooner than that. I think you're going to start to see more and more adoption happen. I think it's a 2 years you'll start to see that. Again, it depends on where you're thinking. Like, is it the higher, like the higher corporates or the SMEs? I think as more SMEs start to get into it, and then they realize that their competitors are using it, you'll start to see that naturally have to happen, right? You're going to have to drive that. So I think in 2 years, for sure, you're going to see a way bigger adoption rate. You'll see better productivity. And I think you'll start to see more and more new types of technologies come out, right? You'll see the agents coming out. You'll see that stuff, and people will realize how to do that and how to utilize those things for their advantage versus simply looking at it as a detriment to their business or too time consuming or too costly, right? And that's always going to be the challenge.
We see this as well, Brad. And again, because of your experience in AI, I mean, we go into some boardrooms and we have some people that do not like Carl and I and do not like AI, and they are just fearful. Like, what's your message to those types of, whether they're business owners or executives or employees? What's your take? What would you say to those people?
I mean, I always tell them, start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. At the end of the day, it's just data. Like, at the end of the day, it's data. And so you got to understand, if you've got the data, you got to be in a position to use that data in a better way. And so it's take a baby step and try stuff, because and I know it's not as straightforward as people think it is either, right? Especially if you've got legacy data sets. People don't understand how you got to do endpoint mapping. You got to do cleanse. You got to get the structured. And I think the other part too is, now people are assuming AI will give you all the answers, and it's not true, right? AI will answer a question, but you got to decide what will you do with that answer, which is how I used to start when I was talking to the corporates that I was dealing with, which is like, first of all, you got to understand, what are you trying to solve for? And what will you do with the information? Like, let's talk about that. Good, bad, or ugly. What's your roadmap? What's your plan when you get this information? How will you use it? How will you, implement it? How will you operationalize it? Because there's no use asking a question that you don't know what to do with the answer of. And that's where you got to start getting them thinking about stuff. Then you can show them, hey, look, you know what? We can save you a shit ton of time just by cleaning this stuff up. And now you can have this every day. I mean, one of the clients I had, I remember, the CEO had to wait, like, I don't know, 4 weeks or 5 weeks to see financial updates, which is ridiculous. You had all the data right there. All you could do is just structure it properly. You could just press a button and you could see your revenue on a basically, back then it was all about dashboards, right? You can see a dashboard right away. You shouldn't have to wait that long. You just got to optimize the process. So then your CFO can go and do shit he needs to do, versus sitting down on a spreadsheet and trying to go back and double check his calculations, or did I get that spreadsheet, or did I pick the wrong cell and screwed up my stuff like that. So.
Well, and again, when we talk to a lot of clients, we always talk about employees are generally in a reactive mode all day long.
Yep.
They're very little time to be proactive. And so we have an example, a number of clients that'll use an AI app, a prompt for payroll reconciliation. What something that used to take 6 to 8 hours now takes them 15 minutes. And we're going, well, now you can actually think about how to, or get around to those tasks you never get around to. And that's kind of when the light goes on and people are like, you can do that? I just use it for writing emails.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So,
and that's part of that use case, right? You need to have those POCs for people to be able to relate back to it. And that's the hard part, is that every business is different. Every task is different, but you have to try to give them those broad-based abilities to link it back to what they're doing. So, and I think there's also fear. People are always afraid to try new stuff, right?
Learn more about future AI business trends by watching these videos here. Enjoy today's episode. Want to learn how AI can impact your business? Then please subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.